Star Wars only, I don't know what the fuck your problem is.
The CEO of Disney has recently been in an earnings call for the quarter 4 earnings and talked about the future of Star Wars after Star Wars Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker. Here's what he has to say. In the case of Star Wars 9, which comes out this December, will be the last of the Skywalker saga, and will go into a hiatus for a few years before the next Star Wars feature. Now that's pretty simple, that's not too much to go on, but a lot of people are really, I don't want to say misinterpreting this, but people really build a lot of narratives out of this. I've seen people say, oh, well, that is confirmed that the Rian Johnson trilogy is canceled. That wasn't even close to being mentioned here. What we know for a fact is that the David Benioff and D.B. Weiss trilogy was initially supposed to be started in December of 2022. Now, he says a few years. Now, what does that mean? Is that 2? Is that 3? Is that 4? Is that 5? We don't know. But what we do know is that we're getting a break from Star Wars. And this is really just repeating the news that we've already known for the past year and a half now, I would say. We've known for a long time that after Star Wars Episode 9, we would be getting a decent break in the Star Wars franchise until the next film, which I think is good. I know some of us may not remember, but back in the day, I always like to say that now, but back in the day, Star Wars had a 3-year time frame between each Star Wars film. So between episodes 4, 5, and 6, it was a 3-year gap between all of them. I mean, that spans over a decade, basically. And you had the same thing with the prequels. In 1999, you had The Phantom Menace, 2002, Attack of the Clones, 2005, Revenge of the Sith. And then 10 years later, we got The Force Awakens. It wasn't until Disney bought Star Wars that you saw this almost yearly release date for Star Wars, and when it comes to episodic films, every 2 years. Now, personally, I do think that was a mistake. I think they should have let it be a 3-year time frame so they could actually build up the story a little bit more and not have all the production problems that they've had. Every single Star Wars film under Disney so far has had major production problems. Episode 7 was originally supposed to come out in May of 2015. It was delayed until December because of script problems with Michael Arndt. You get Rogue One, that was saved in the reshoots, basically, in the edits that happened with Tony Gilroy. What was next? The Last Jedi, that was also delayed 8 months, supposed to come out in May of 2017. Delayed 8 months for the script rewrite with Rian Johnson. And that came out in December of 2017, and then a few months later you had Solo, which had notorious production problems with the directors leaving, a bunch of reshoots, the budget went way too much up and everything. I mean, it was just a chaotic nightmare for that one. And then Episode 9, you originally had the director Colin Trevorrow, who departed because of, yet again, script problems and story conceptions. J.J. Abrams comes in and has to make the film within a 2-year time frame, and they were really rushed on that. I mean, they're still working on the film as we speak, which is completely fine, but in the editing process, they've had to do it since the film basically started, which isn't awful, but it's also not ideal. So every single Disney Star Wars movie has had production problems because it's been so rushed. So when Bob Iger comes out and says, we're going into a hiatus, all I hear is good news. Because Star Wars needs a hiatus. When David Benioff and D.B. Weiss left the Star Wars franchise to go do their Netflix deal, and good fucking riddance, I really don't care. But there were some inside sources that were talking about how Lucasfilm really doesn't know what Star Wars is at the moment. They're trying to figure out what Star Wars is and what it represents. And I think that's a great mentality to have when you're going into a hiatus after the sequel trilogy. I think it's kind of odd to have this question after the sequel trilogy is made, and you didn't have this before. But remember, when Star Wars was bought by Disney in 2012, almost instantly, not even almost instantly when they bought it, they said, we're having a film come out in 2015. They rushed the shit out of it to make their money back. Now that they've made their money back, it's one of the ideas of, okay, well, we've made our money back, we're going to keep making money from this, but how do we make the profits grow even more? How do we create something new in the Star Wars franchise that isn't doing what the sequel trilogy is doing? Because you can't just keep doing what the sequel trilogy did and base your entire story off of nostalgia of the originals and the prequels and whatnot. You got to do something new now if you're going to keep creating Star Wars films. And let's not kid ourselves here, they're going to have to make more Star Wars films. Besides Solo, almost every single Star Wars film has made $1 billion in the box office under Disney. That's great money. That's something you can make a lot of money on. Why stop that while you're ahead? But when you go into a hiatus like this, you really have to plan accordingly. You actually have to get the directors and the writers set years before the film starts production. You have to get the story straight, and you can't have a good story in the Star Wars universe if you, as a production company like Lucasfilm, does not know what you're doing when it comes to making Star Wars. You don't know what it's about. You don't know what the consensus of Star Wars is. If you can't get that down, there's no point in making films. So I would rather them take a break. I would rather them gear down and just think a little bit of what they're going to do for the future of Star Wars and focus on what Star Wars is to the world. to them, to us as an audience, and to the fans, what Star Wars is really about. What's the story that needs to be told in the Star Wars universe? I've noticed over the past few years, Star Wars fans, I think, have also lost sight on what Star Wars is, and it's kind of reflective of our time, of what we look at in the Star Wars franchise. So it makes sense to me why Lucasfilm also is kind of confused on what Star Wars should be and what it is. Because you see a lot of people when they do these weird little trivia games on how many horns does Darth Maul have on his head, and where does the Kyber crystals come from, and what planet is that dealing with, and how does the Force deal with this person becoming a Jedi Knight, and all that stuff, and just really minute details about certain blasters and clones, and what spaceship can do what, at what speed, and how its layout is, all that. Who fucking cares, man? I mean, I'm sorry, it's stuff like that where I go, it's not interesting. That's not what Star Wars is about at all either. One of the great things about the original trilogies, if you look at the Star Wars films, the world around it, all the little minute details people get obsessed with, wasn't anything that they were looking at and saying, alright, we're going to put this blaster in the back corner right there, and in 5-10 years people are going to make books about this blaster or this clone trooper and all that stuff, and Quinlan Vos in the background of the Phantom Menace. Let's build an entire story arc off of that. Who fucking cares about that? It wasn't about that. The Star Wars world was something that was just lived in, but it was taking part of a bigger story, and that story was the story of Luke Skywalker becoming a Jedi, redeeming his father. It's the story of fathers and sons. It's a family soap opera, as Lucas would say himself, and that's what I think Star Wars needs to focus on, is going on this grand adventure, finding your destiny, and looking at the deeper problems that we have as a world and as a society. A lot of the recent Star Wars films, I would say almost every single one, including Solo and Rogue One, I feel like I've missed the mark on what Star Wars is. I mean, I do not like The Last Jedi by any stretch of the imagination, but god damn it, at least it tried to do something different and get into the nitty-gritty on what the Force is and what good and evil is in the Star Wars universe. It completely fell flat on its face on doing that and ruined almost every single thing that Star Wars represents before that. But still, you look at Rogue One, you look at Solo, it didn't do anything new. It's just telling stories that we've already heard or seen before, and it gets involved with those little details. I mean, literally, Rogue One was built off one sentence in the opening crawl of A New Hope, and Solo was built off of a few sentences that Han Solo was saying to Obi-Wan and Luke in the cantina, and that is the entire backstory to his character, which became Solo a Star Wars story. They have no impact, and they have no overarching story, I think, that involves the Star Wars franchise, other than, oh, this is Star Wars universe, so you're gonna like it. We need something that we as a society and an audience can connect to and feel like we're actually going on an adventure involving the destiny of our characters, involving some moral consequence, I guess, something that really connects with us on an emotional level, and the sequels have lacked that. The new films have lacked that, and I would say even the prequels lacked that when they came out, and you've had that problem with Star Wars since its inception. And that's one of the great things about the original trilogy, is that it has had many different creators involved with it. Irvin Kershner, Richard Marquand, George Lucas, Gary Kurtz. These people came in, they worked together. Lawrence Kasdan as well, can't forget him. You had all these people coming in with different ideas on the stories to be told in the Star Wars universe, and you had an amazing trilogy. But when you come to a different point of view, where you have the prequels where it's just one man's creative vision and that's it, you don't really have any collaboration at all, you're going to get what you had with the prequels, which is a interesting story with just a completely flawed execution. And then you get to the sequel trilogy, and it's more of a production line kind of thing, where it's a business. Oh, we're making these films because you're going to like them because you remember, and also we got to have one come out every few years, and let's really not worry about the story too much, it's about the money. I get it, you're making a film, you gotta make money, but if you're going to be in the point of Lucasfilm, if you're going to be from their position, you need to realize Star Wars is not just some product you can make, and they understand that now. They're now realizing we gotta actually focus on what Star Wars is and what it should mean to the audience and to the world, and when you get to that, it's a lot more interesting of a question and a story to be told. And so I like the fact that they're going to go in a hiatus. I like the fact that they're going to take time and think about what Star Wars is, so we can not only build up hype for the next movie, but we can also build up the idea on what Star Wars is and should be into the future. This franchise is damn near 45 years old now, and let's be honest, it's not going to get any younger. And if we want this to keep going and keep being something we can all look back and love on and have a generational kind of story to be told with it, we need to figure out what Star Wars is and what it should be. but that's just my 2 cents on it. Tell me your thoughts below. I'm Star Wars Only. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. Are you happy to hear that the Star Wars franchise will be going on a hiatus after Star Wars Episode 9? Or are you sad to see that the films may be delayed? We don't know how many years it's going to be until we see another Star Wars film, so let's enjoy it while it lasts, if you can. I'm Star Wars Only. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. I'll see y'all next time, and may the Force be with you, always.